Hello and welcome back to the Wellbeing Training Academy. We're really glad you're here today because we're tackling something that makes even the most seasoned professionals feel that tight knot of worry in their
Ooh,
stomach, and that is those difficult conversations at work. You know the ones that I'm talking about, don't you? The conversation you've been putting off for weeks, and the feedback that you've got to give somebody that you know is going to upset them or they're not going to take very well. Um, or a boundary that you need to set with a colleague, a performance issue that's affecting the whole team. It's not fun. Nobody wants to do it. But here's the thing, we quite often approach these conversations like they're battles that we need to win or landmines that we need to tiptoe around. But what if there was a different option? What if there is another way to do it? What if we could have these conversations with sort of genuine compassion and still be clear, honest, get our message across without upsetting people or making people feel bad or feeling horrible about it ourselves. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, isn't it, Andrew?
that's right. And it's very important because I know from my own experience when I've had to do things like that, or even when I'm going to be the recipient of things like that, how stressful that can be. And yeah, like I say, it doesn't matter how experienced you are as a manager, a leader, or whoever it is that's giving the feedback. It can be a daunting thing. But first of all, shall we say who we are?
I mean, yeah, I suppose so. For people if they don't know, if they don't know who we are already, I'm Abby Twomlow. I'm an anxiety specialist, psychologist, and wellbeing trainer.
Hi, and I'm Andrew Farquharson, and I'll say what I usually say. I'm all of those things as well. Well, nearly all of them. Anyway, what is compassion? What does that mean? So let's have a wee address of what you could call is the elephant in the room. Some people hear compassionate conversation and they think, oh, it's going to be sort of all weak and lovey-dovey and overly nice and avoiding the real issue and skirting around whatever it is that's got to be said, and nothing gets said. Well, that's not really what we're talking about. Compassion literally means to suffer with, is to have empathy, really. It's about recognizing the humanity in the person sitting across from you or the group, whoever it is, while still holding to sound grand, to holding a space for truth and accountability. Um, there is research, and research from organizational psychologists shows that when difficult conversations include compassion, we actually get better outcomes on every sort of way you want to measure this. Better retention, faster changes, stronger relationships, better productivity, and also, more importantly, perhaps, less likelihood of the same issues recurring. Think about your own experiences. Can you remember a time when someone gave you hard feedback with genuine care? What did that feel like compared to when someone was harsh, dismissive, cold, aggressive? The content might have been similar, but the delivery made all of the difference in whether you actually heard it and were able then to do something about it. Here's the paradox. Compassion actually makes difficult conversations more effective, not less. When people feel psychologically safe, and we've talked about psychological safety before, when people feel psychologically safe, when they know that you're on their side, even though you're addressing a problem, an issue, the defensiveness is minimized. Their defenses come down and they actually listen instead of just wanting to defend themselves. And that's really crucial. We've had a number of podcasts about listening, effective listening, listening to understand, not to jump in, rebut, or whatever. So it's really crucial. Compassion doesn't mean protecting people from discomfort or difficult truths. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is actually to be honest about the problem that's hurting someone's career, relationship, business. Avoiding hard conversations isn't compassion, it's cowardness disguised as kindness. So the goal is what organizational experts call caring candor.
And it's really important, isn't it? Because I know I've been in situations in businesses, and in workplaces where, and it happens a lot, doesn't it? Those difficult conversations have to be had. And I've been the recipient of a difficult conversation where the person giving feedback wasn't harsh or unkind, but they were disingenuinely compassionate. It was kind of like, it felt really ick, is all I can say, because it didn't feel genuine and it actually made me feel quite small. So that's not the way to do it either. And I've also been on the other side of that where I've had to give somebody feedback and it's something, I was really quite young at the time. I was, probably 19, 20, and I had to tell my own manager about his BO problem that was putting customers off.
Oh,
Now, I seriously thought about not saying anything, just thinking like he's my boss, he could fire me at that sort of age. You're a bit unsure about stuff like that. But I also knew that if it was me, and this is something I thought about, if it was me, would I want to know and how would I want somebody to tell me? And that is kind of a really good way to do it, is to look at it from that other perspective. And I guess that's key, isn't it? It's how you prepare to take that action, how you prepare to have that discussion. So how's the best way to do it? Because it's thinking about actionable steps before the conversation even begins. So I think the first thing you need to do is check those intentions before you have that discussion. Really be honest with yourself. What is your intention? What are you actually wanting out of this talk that you're going to have? What do you want out of this conversation? Are you trying to help that person to succeed, to do better? Or are you trying to punish them? Are you trying to shame them or make them feel bad? Are you looking to solve a problem or are you trying to prove that you're right? Are you wanting to improve a situation or are you actually just venting your frustration? Because your intention is the foundation of everything, and it is also going to be the foundation of how this discussion goes. Because, excuse me, if you're going into a conversation to criticize somebody, blame somebody, make them feel small, no amount of technique is going to make that compassionate. It doesn't matter what you do with your body language or your tone of voice, because that's when it comes across, as it did with that lady talking to me, is disingenuine. You're pretending to be compassionate, and that is a completely different thing because people can smell inauthentic compassion a mile away. Um, and the intention that's always going to serve you best is this: I want to address this issue in a way that strengthens our working relationships and helps us both to move forward. That is always the best intention that you can have. I think the next step after that, after you've kind of thought about the preparation, is to get clear on the facts. So separate the observable facts, what you can actually see, from your interpretation of that. And in mental health and psychology, we're constantly talking about interpretations and how we filter the information to make sense of it. So what is the actual fact and what is your filter of those facts? Because this is huge. And it might be easier if I give you an example. So um, you don't care about this project is an interpretation. That's not a measurable fact. You've missed the last 3 deadlines and you haven't responded to my emails. That is fact. Okay, so it's something tangible, not just what you think is going on. So starting with the facts is going to keep your conversation much more grounded, and it makes it more difficult for the person that you're speaking to be defensive, or for that defensiveness to take over, because it's much easier for them to argue with you about you saying that they don't care. There's definitely an argument that they can make back for that, rather than those documented behaviours. If they haven't responded to 4 emails, they haven't responded to 4 emails. They can't argue that in the same way as something that you've interpreted. So the the next point on from that, I guess, is to consider things from their side. Look at their context. So this is where compassion really starts to come in. So before the conversation, just have a moment to think about what might be going on for that person. It doesn't mean making excuses for their behavior or for their actions, but it does mean approaching them as an actual human being. Are they dealing with something difficult at home? And you might not know the answer to that, but you've kind of got to give them the opportunity maybe to explain that. Are they feeling really overwhelmed? Is this behavior unusual for them, or is there a pattern? What pressures might they be under that you just don't know about? And like I say, you don't actually need to know all the answers because you'll learn more within that conversation. But if you approach the conversation with curiosity rather than judgment, it will change everything because it will allow them, like Andrew said, that space to kind of be honest back and without being defensive. And you might find out things from that conversation that are really important that you need to know. So that's just the preparation. And from there, we have to kind of get into the conversation itself. So plan the first 30 seconds. You cannot plan the entire conversation because you don't know where it's going to go, but you can plan how you're going to start. So have a think about the first 30 seconds of this difficult conversation. And you can sort of determine whether it's going to be productive or whether it's going to be destructive. And again, your intention, that first step, is going to play a big part in that. So plan your opening. Plan how it's going to be clear, how it's going to be passionate, and how it's going to kind of set the intention of the discussion without ambiguity. So something like, I want to just have a talk with you because I care about your success here, and I've noticed something, and I think we need to talk about it together. Right? It's a really nice, gentle introduction into that conversation. You're not going to be getting their person's back up. You're stating facts like I've noticed something. You're giving them the space for it to be a two-way thing. And you're telling them that you want to do this together. So I think that's really important because then you can have that honest conversation about it rather than just you be feeding back and that person getting more and more anxious or stressed about it.
Yeah, so now you've done your preparation, and you're sitting across from your colleague. How do you start? Let's start the conversation. You've got maybe your first sentence or so organized already, but perhaps don't just dive straight into the problem or the issue. You can simply get a little bit of human connection. How are you doing? It actually shows some interest in that person. They can come back and have a wee chat. And then you can start to go in clearly and kindly. Remember those facts that you prepared. Now's the time to use them. Be direct, but not harsh. Something like, I need to talk to you about the Johnson report. It was due last Tuesday, and we still don't have it. And this is the third deadline that you've missed this month. It's impacting on the team's ability to move forward. And notice what this does. It's clear, it's factual, and it explains the impact without attacking a person's character. Pause, listen, really listen. We mentioned this earlier and in other podcasts. This is where most difficult conversations go wrong. We don't listen. We're so focused on what we need to say that we forget to listen. And after we've stated the issue, stop talking. Give the person space to respond. And when they do, listen with the intention to understand, not rebut, not dive in, not go on to the next thing which shows you've not listened. Repeating that. Listen with the intention to understand. And you might hear things that surprise you. Maybe they're struggling with something you didn't know about. Maybe there's a systemic issue. that you are unaware of. And maybe they've a completely different perspective on what happened. This is compassion in action, creating space for their reality alongside yours. So, validate before problem solving. Even if you don't agree with everything that's said, you can validate their feelings and acknowledge their experience. Oh, that sounds incredibly stressful. Or I can understand why you felt caught up in that problem or between two competing priorities. Shows you a sort of a bit of empathy, and it can go a long way. Validation doesn't mean agreement. Again, I'll repeat that. Validation doesn't mean agreement. It means that it means that you recognize their humanity and their experience as real for them. So collaborate on solution. All right. So you can say or move along from I'm solving your problem to we're solving our problem together because it is our problem. Ask questions like, what support do you need to help you meet deadlines? What can we do to prevent this from happening again? How can we make things better? Oh, what help do you need here? Just questions like that. And this approach maintains accountability while treating the person as a capable adult, not a child that needs to be reprimanded. Be willing to acknowledge your part. Sometimes we contribute to the problems we're trying to address, even unintentionally. Maybe we weren't clear about our expectations, and maybe we didn't provide adequate resources. Uh, maybe your own behavior created confusion. Be willing to acknowledge this part. Acknowledging it isn't weakness. It actually shows signs of integrity. It models the very behavior that you're actually asking for, taking responsibility and being open to feedback.
Yeah, I think that's really clear, isn't it? I think you can get caught up in these conversations and you're so honed in on what you need to get across that you can just sort of fire at them. Even if you're trying to be kind about it, you can sort of fire it all at them and not really acknowledge that you might have had a part to play because you're not giving that person the opportunity to share their perspective, because perspective is everything. Just because you think and interpret something one way, they might think and interpret something a completely different way. And I think, there's the preparation, there's the conversation, but I also think it's really important to sort of follow up a little bit as well. Because the conversation doesn't end when you leave the room, when you stop talking, because compassionate communication includes what comes next and what happens next. If you are seeing that conversation as something to improve and build on your relationship, then it doesn't just stop at the end of that conversation. So document and clarify and send a brief follow-up email, just sort of summarizing what you've talked about and what you've agreed, because this protects both of you as well, and it ensures that you're both on the same page. And again, keep it factual, keep it forward looking. Say something like, thanks for chatting with me today. As we discussed, you're going to submit that report by Friday and we'll check in next Monday to see how things are going. And then follow it through. If you said that you're going to provide resources, provide them, because this is a two-way street, isn't it? If you said that you're going to check in. Your integrity and following through demonstrates that the conversation was about caring, not just about criticizing. And also, it shows that it doesn't need to be uncomfortable if that kind of follow up is there. It's showing you care and that you want things to go well for them and that you want to be there for them. So, recognize progress when you see improvement and acknowledge it as well, because it kind of closes the loop and reinforces the behavior that you want to see. So, I've noticed that you've met the deadline on this other project. That's exactly what we talked about. Like, thanks for getting that done. And it's not also about constant praise, because some people feel uncomfortable with that as well. Not that we should, but it's not about sort of over praising a child. It's about recognizing that that change is happening and that you're noticing their efforts, because if they've gone from not doing something to doing something, that's because they're putting in effort. And if you recognize that, then they're going to feel seen, and that's going to build that psychological safety, and they're going to feel much more valued for that. So these are kind of the things that we want you to remember from our chat today. So difficult conversations don't have to be destructive. We don't have to go into them with that fear, because actually there can be moments where real trust is built and real growth can happen in those conversations. They can be really positive things. Compassion isn't about avoiding these conversations. It's not about not delivering those hard truths or protecting people from discomfort. They're grown adults, and their interpretation is up to them. All you can do is treat people with dignity. Think about how you would want to be told this information, and they can be respected even when you're addressing problems. So it's about being clear, and it's about being genuinely kind. And it's also about holding people accountable while remembering that they are human beings. They are there to do a job, and they have things that they need to do as part of that job. But you also might need to consider that there's a reason why they haven't, and allow them to express that. So next time you're dreading that difficult conversation, please remember this. You have the opportunity to either damage a relationship or deepen it. And the choice is in how you show up in that conversation. So be honest, be kind, be clear, be genuinely compassionate, because your workplace and your relationships with those people in it will be much better for it.
And I would just like to reiterate all of that. Be honest, be kind, be clear, be compassionate. So thank you again for listening. And if you want to find out any more, do get in touch with us at wellbeingtrainingacademy.com, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Goodbye.
Yeah, until next time, keep having these conversations that matter, keep looking after your team, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.